Welcome to church with the man of God at large. Now, I know this isn't your typical church service, but I'm not a typical preacher either. So I know that we're across all of Middle Tennessee. We're all snowed in. We're sequestered. We can't get out anywhere. We can't travel to the places that we normally do, and we can't go to church. So I thought what I would do is I would bring church to you. Now, this isn't going to be just one message. It's actually going to be three. And it's not your typical sort of message that you're going to hear, especially not today in the modern church, because it's not encouraging. It's not uplifting. It doesn't fan the fires of your ego. It doesn't pat you on the back and tell you you're doing a good job. It's actually very convicting. It's very corrective. It hurt my feelings while I was studying it, while I was preparing it, because it talks about a very real epidemic, a plague that has gripped the church, especially here in America, and it's just not talked about very much. As a matter of fact, I look at it like this, that it is a dragon with three heads. And this dragon, this three-headed serpent, is all part of one particular beast. And this beast is the beast of lust. Now, all of you ladies are probably saying, well, yeah, of course, my husband really struggles with that, or I have a brother that's really in the throes of this dilemma. But you know what? According to the data that's out there, plus all of our personal experience, it's something that women struggle with as well. It's a universal problem. It is a people problem, a human problem, because it is a sin problem, which is universal. So what we're going to be using as our text is the Word of God. And inside the Word of God, we have many things contained. We have literally the mind of Christ, who is God. How does He feel about you? How does He think about your life, your lifestyle, and the choices that you make? What are His plans for you, for this world, and for humanity as a whole? And we also read about the body of sin in which we have, that we struggle against, that we war against on a daily basis before coming to Jesus Christ, where He frees you from the constraints that we have lived with for so long. And we also read about the soul of man that is torn betwixt these two warring parties, God and the enemy of our souls, the devil. And believe me, something must be eternally precious that if both God and the devil are warring for it, striving to have supremacy in your life. In 1 John 2:16, he says, "For all that is in the world, the lust of the flesh and the lust of the eyes, and the pride of life is not of the Father, but is of the world." That which we struggle against, what keeps us down, beaten, broken, busted, and disgusted, is not from God. The sinful desires that we have that keep us in the throes of debauchery are not something that God has given to you. It is a twisting and a perversion of the God-given desires, the God-given thought processes, or even our natural inclinations as a human being that we have marred and that we have so twisted that they do not even resemble what God initially created them for. And it says the lust of the flesh, well, we all know what that is. Well, I want this. That would feel really good. A matter of fact, that would be everything that I desire. I can sit here and I can taste the liquor in my mouth as I think about it. I can smell the cigarette smoke. I can smell the pot just sitting here reminiscing and thinking about it. What would that drug feel like? I can just feel it now coursing through my veins as it tickles all through the tip of my head right down to the soles of my feet. And if you've ever experienced any of those things, you can do it too. Once your mind goes there, you are instantly back to that point in time when you used to imbibe and used to do those things. And that is true for any sort of sinful behavior that we used to give ourselves over to. And the lust of the eyes, well, that looks good. That looks very entertaining. It can't be nearly as dangerous as people make it out to be. I'm pretty sure those church folks, those old Bible thumpers, they're just making much ado about nothing, because that really looks inviting. And look how much fun it is for everyone else that's over there. Now, when I was a little bit younger, I'm 46 now, so you don't see them nearly as much as you used to, but we used to see a lot of beer commercials on TV. And everyone was always having a great time. You know, they're at the tailgate parties and they're popping a cold one and everybody's woo, and they're having a good time and everyone's celebrating. What it does not show you is the treatment center where everyone are laying on their bunk, huddled in a fetal position, sweating, vomiting, sometimes urinating on themselves because they are in the throes of delirium tremens or DTs, where they're withdrawing from the alcohol. It doesn't show the men and women that are living behind the dumpsters in some of their major cities, and now even in small ones like here in Perry County, Tennessee, because they have drank and drugged themselves into oblivion. That's not going to sell. No one's going to buy your product if you can accurately tell them that this is poison and it will kill you and rob you of every good thing in your life and every opportunity. But it does. But when we first see it, it looks so inviting. It looks so welcoming, and it looks as though it would be so fulfilling for everything that we looked for. And finally, he says, the pride of life. Well, I deserve it. I've had a really hard week. You don't know what the woman I live with is like. You don't know what my husband is like. You don't know what I've had to deal with, the trauma, the PTSD, the ASB, whatever sort of acronyms that we have to describe just a bad upbringing or a bad lifestyle or poor choices that we have. We can always think back to that and think, you know what? Because of this, I deserve better. I deserve things that may not necessarily be coming to me. That's the pride of life. The pride of life tells you that you deserve things that no, in fact, you do not. That you have not worked for, or things that are not good for you to begin with. But that pride of life will sneak in and tell you that this is yours for the taking and you need it. And he says that's not from God. This lust of the flesh that, wow, I bet that feels good. And oh, the lust of the eyes, that looks good. And the pride of life, well, after all, I deserve it. That doesn't come from God. That comes from the world and from the wicked one who is the God of this world. So first, let's talk about the one head that has totally engulfed the church in America. Now, not just America, it's really worldwide, but I live in America. So first and foremost, that's where I concern myself with, because that's my own backyard. And that is adultery. If you don't know what adultery is, well, I am going to tell you. And I hate to be the first one to do it, but someone has to do it, so let's jump in. Adultery is an unlawful sexual act with someone else's spouse. Not just an unlawful sexual act, but any unlawful sexual act. So if you have to ask yourself, well, does this quite? Yes, it does. If you say, well, I wonder if this rises to that, yes, it absolutely does. Anything that you are doing and you are committing sexually with someone's spouse, not yours, qualifies as adultery. Now, why would men and women commit adultery in the first place? Well, because, as a friend of mine used to say, people suck. People suck. They're mean, they get on your nerves, they try your patience, they don't fulfill your needs. They don't fulfill your desires, and they leave you wanting, destitute, and looking for more. And when that happens, it's so easy. It is so easy, especially today in our modern culture, where all you have to do, and you can anonymously do this, just pick up and find someone that is willing to step in and meet those needs that you feel so unfulfilled in right now. Now, why would people do this in the first place? It's not just because your wife burns the meatloaf. It's not just because she doesn't fulfill all of your sexual needs and desires. It's not because your husband doesn't listen to you enough or that he doesn't meet your emotional needs. It's not a physical, outward issue. It's a heart issue. Jeremiah 17:9 says, the heart is deceitful above all things and desperately wicked. Who can know it? It will lie to you when the truth would suit you better. I always hate seeing these things that just say, follow your heart. I've seen t-shirts like that. I've seen bumper stickers, follow your heart. If you want to die, if you want to destroy your life, if you want to waste whatever precious years you have on this earth, then yes, follow your heart. Your heart will lie to you. It will tell you that you want and you need things that you, in fact, do not. It will tell you that things are good for you when they are detrimental to your very soul. It is deceitful. Not only is it deceitful, it's deceitful above all things. It is the top tier, absolute pinnacle of deception, and desperately wicked. It will seek to deceive you, and it is so easy to be ensnared and to be lied to be enthralled in this deception that comes from your own heart, because it's your voice. And it sounds so inviting. And it knows just which buttons to push, because it was there when those buttons were installed. Now, in the United States, 224 million men and women identify as Christian. So they self-identify as Christians. When you see those annoying people that come up to you in the shopping mall or on the street, and they've got the little pad and they start asking you questions, and you're like, look, I'm just trying to go to GNC to pick up some stuff. My wife just sent me here to pick this item. I want to talk to you. When they ask you all that stuff, that's how they find this sort of stuff out. Or they take internet polls and stuff. But there's 224 million people here that identify as Christian. As many as 25% will commit adultery. That's 56 million. That's 1 in 4. If you were to go and sit at dinner in your favorite steakhouse or something, and you've got 4 married couples that are sitting there, statistically, at least one of them is going to commit adultery sometime in their marriage. Now you say, well, that's everybody else. Of course, the church is going to do a whole lot better. Well, let's look. Another study suggests that 65% of men and 55% of women, so guys, we're a little more guilty here, women in the general population may cheat before age 40, a figure that doesn't appear to differ significantly for Christians. Y'all catch that? A figure that doesn't appear to differ significantly for Christians. 65% of men, 55% of women cannot stay within the confines of their own marriage bed. They're looking for something continuously to meet the needs that they so feel as something that absolutely must be fulfilled. That a lack that they have in their own life, an unfulfilled desire, a hole in their heart and their soul that they're looking for someone else to patch. Now, if you think as a Christian that God somehow approves of your adultery because your wife is especially onerous, or your husband, he's especially mean, maybe he's cruel, maybe he's vindictive in the words that he says, that he doesn't meet your emotional needs, I'm sorry to tell you that no, he doesn't. When God tells you that you should not do this, he knew all of the circumstances of your life in advance. And there's no parenthetical statement in the scriptures that says, unless this happens. Or if you encounter this, then you get a pass. It's not in there. He simply tells you that you do not need to do it, and we'll go over today exactly why. Now, Jesus said in Matthew 5, verse 28, he says, but I say unto you that whosoever, that means any of you, looketh on a woman to lust after her hath committed adultery with her already in his heart. So maybe you haven't jumped over the fence. Maybe you haven't burrowed under some barrier that someone has out there to keep you out. But if you're looking and you're fantasizing, if you're thinking in your mind and just running through all the scenarios about what that might actually look like, what that might actually feel like, what the fallout might be, then he says that you've already committed adultery. See, Jesus took the standard of holiness and righteousness that existed up at that time, and he ratcheted it up a notch. See, before, it had already been known that, look, you ain't supposed to sleep around. You're not supposed to jump outside the marriage bed and sleep with somebody else's wife or somebody else's husband. But he says if you even look and you think about it, then you've already done it. Now, why would he say that? Well, because where the heart leads, then the body follows. Every wicked act, every sinful action has its birthplace, its genesis, right up here, where you start thinking about it. where you start fantasizing about it, where you dream about it at night because it's constantly on repeat through your mind. Now, I'm someone in recovery, and so we always say in recovery that relapse starts way before you ever pick up the drug. It starts long before you call the plug and you're trying to make a connection. It starts when you look back over the life that God has already delivered you from, and you start to say to yourself, it wasn't that bad. I had some good times, didn't I? Then you get with one of your friends and y'all talk about, y'all remember when we went up there? Yeah, that was crazy. I can't believe we didn't get caught. And you start to romanticize that which you've already done. And once you do, you are on a trajectory to do it yet again, because when your mind fixates on something, it will always, always, always find expression in your hands and your feet. Now, Proverbs 6:32 says, "But whoso committeth adultery with a woman," this applies to you too, ladies, "lacketh understanding. He that doeth it destroyeth his own soul." See, when you commit adultery, you're sinning more than just against your spouse. You're sinning and doing more than just breaking the marriage covenant. And even more than sinning against God. You are literally destroying your own soul. Now, adultery doesn't begin in the hotel room, and it doesn't begin in the sexting back and forth. "Hey girl, looking good today. So glad to see you in that dress." It begins when your eyes wander over the fence. When you start to look at things in your neighbor's backyard and think, "I deserve that. I bet that she would meet all of the deficits that my wife has in our marriage. I bet that my needs, my desires would be met there where they're not met at my home right now." And once you do, you are on track to fulfill those desires some way or another. Now you say, "Well, I would never." Every single person that I have met in the jail, when I do jail ministry a couple times a week, every single one of them is in jail for something that at one time they swore that they would never do. When you say, "I will never," those nevers eventually become a reality if you obsess over it and you keep that playing through your heart and your mind. Now Job says, and this is in 31:1, he says, "I made a covenant with mine eyes. Why then should I think upon a maid?" Look, I'm already in a contractual agreement. You say, "Well, I didn't make a good choice." That is really too bad. That is unfortunate. That when they say "to death do you part," that's not a suggestion, that's a command. And I talk to people and I understand, and I'm not speaking from some ivory tower. I have problems too, and I have deficits, and I have all sorts of character defects that I'm slowly but surely trying to soften the edges of. But I've talked to so many people and they say, "Well, I just don't really think that we're right for each other. I wonder who the woman is that God planned for me to marry." And say, "Well, aren't you already married?" "Yeah, we've been married 3 years. Congratulations, she's the one." Once you make that covenant agreement, it's not just between you. It's not just between the two of you and the local courthouse. This is a covenant agreement with God Himself as the other party. And you have promised not just your sweetheart that's standing across from you, not just the best man to the wedding party that's gathered in front of you. You have promised God Almighty that, yes, this is my beloved until the day I die. Now, when you say "to death do us part," you may be setting a goal because you're already miserable, but nevertheless, that's the agreement that you've made, and it is binding for all people in all time. Now, in Hebrews 13:4, he says that marriage is honorable in all, and the bed undefiled. You're not sinning against God. You're not sinning against her. Lady, you're not sinning against him or against your own soul in the marriage covenant, in the marriage bed. But, whoremongers and adulterers, God will judge. You know what a whoremonger is, right? It's someone that cavorts with whores. And honestly, that's just a human term. I know women find it offensive because that's generally how we use the term, but trust me, it applies to men. To people that cannot possess their body, their vessel that is God-given, and keep their pants on, and their clothes on, and their mouths shut, and their eyes focused forward, and they give themselves away, piece by piece, little bit at a time. God says that's a whoremonger. Now, I know that that's a hard label, and I know that we like to use softer language like, well, they're just immoral. Or maybe, we use a $5 word like promiscuous, but whoremonger is a sufficient word. Sin should sound offensive. It should hurt your feelings. It should cause you to feel revulsion and shame when you hear it, because that's God's response to it. It's a vile thing to sin against Him, to sin against yourself, to sin against your partner, and it should not look, sound, or be accepted as something good. But He says whoremongers and adulterers, God will judge. This is a promise. I like the promises in Scripture like, I'll never leave you or forsake you, or he that cometh to me I will no wise cast out, no one be able to snatch you out of my hand. I like those promises, but this is a promise too, that He says if you're an adulterer or if you're a whoremonger, that God will judge you for it. Now, you may be able to avoid the courts. You can put software and different apps on your phone that will keep your browsing history safe from prying eyes, or you can turn off Life 360 and step away into some neighborhood that you ought not be in. You can do that. And some people go their entire lives, 20, 30, 40, 50 years married, and their spouse never finds out about their infidelity. And you may be able to avoid the divorce court, the litigation, the alimony, the taking the house and the car and all that stuff, but you will not evade the throne, because God has made a promise to you. And He says, if you do this, I will judge you for it, and you will be condemned. And He doesn't sleep. He doesn't take a break. He's not going to be looking at someone else and miss your deceit, your deception, and your infidelity. He sees it, and He will call you to account for it, and there is no escaping that judgment. Now, if you thought that this was kind of heavy, and it was maybe a little bit depressing, perhaps a little bit offensive, well, the next time we're going to look at pornography, one veritable plague that has even seeped into the church. It's everywhere. A matter of fact, things that we never thought would be socially acceptable are now celebrated. What will it look like in 5 years, 10 years? I know that today I see things on television that you had to pay extra money to view when I was a kid. What will it look like for our kids, for my kids, for their kids? Because the world is on a downward spiral of degradation and immorality that there is no turning back from. And you can be swept up in it. You can cast off all restraint, throw your hands back like you're on a water slide, and just ride it all the way to the ground, and it'll take you there. Or you can get off the sinking ship before it goes down and be rescued and be saved. And when we look at pornography, it's not a man problem. It's not a problem that only men have to deal with. It's not a problem that people outside the church alone have to deal with. It's everywhere, and I'll show it to you. So, tune in next time, and we will look at some of these other terrible things that are seeping into the church that are vying for your soul and the soul of your children. See ya.